Kar Shalom, welcome to our watercolor journey. Today's painting has a bit more detail, so we will take you step by step through it. The materials used are listed in the description below. On the palette we have French Ultramarine, Quinacridone Magenta and Quinacridone Gold as the primaries. Then we have various mixes. The grey mix with French Ultramarine, Quin Magenta and Quin Gold, a green mix with French Ultramarine and Quin Gold, a purple mix with French Ultramarine and Quin Magenta, an orange mix with Quin Magenta and Quin Gold, and finally a brown mix from French Ultramarine, Quin Magenta and Quin Gold. You will notice that the brown mix and the grey mix has the same base colors, but the ratios differ to get the different colors. Experiment with your ratios to find the combination that you want. Adding more of the one or the other color will create interesting variations in your premixes. Right, so let's start. Draw a basic sketch of your landscape. Here we have a mountain range in the background, a few trees and a small house on the left, and to the right we have a river flowing from the mountain range to the foreground. Make very sure that you have a straight line at the mountain range. If your water line there is not straight, your water will seem as if the river is standing upright and not running flat. Place the paper at a slight angle and then use a large brush or a hake to wet the sky area. Take care to wet around the mountains and the trees you have drawn. For now, you only want to wet the sky. Use a large brush and start your sky in the right-hand corner with a light mix of French Ultramarine. Make diagonal strokes which peter out towards the left. Then add a few strokes of Quin Magenta. Keep it light and allow the paint to mix with the water on the paper. Finally, add a few strokes of Quin Gold. You use the magenta between the blue and the gold to avoid your sky turning green. The magenta helps to neutralize the colors so that you don't get a green sky. Now you can add another layer of the same colors. You can add the colors a bit stronger now and again allow them to blend on the paper. Rinse your brush slightly and then wet the mountains. It's not a problem if there is still some color on your brush. It will add interest to your mountain range. Add touches of the purple and the grey mixes to vary the texture of the mountains. The one on the right is further away, so the colors are cooler and a bit softer. The one on the left has warmer colors and is more solid, not as soft as the one on the right. This brings the mountain on the left a little bit forward. Here the edge bled a bit into the sky, but it's not a problem. If that happens, you will see how you can fix it a bit later. Now add a thin layer of green with touches of gold and brown to form the tree line around the house. Here you will work wet into wet and wet on dry, where the trees are. Again, some bleeding may occur, but you can use that to your advantage. Use the tip of the brush to add the colors. Vary between the greens, browns, blues and yellows to create interest and a variety in the foliage. The soft edges created now will give you distance. Notice that the tree on the right of the house has a hard edge to the right, so it looks closer than the trees with the soft edges. Try to leave small white areas to resemble light shining through the trees. Allow the paint to settle for a few seconds, then use a store card to score some lines in the paint to form tree trunks. Where the paint has dried a bit, you will see that the card pushes the paint away to expose the white of the paper. Where the paint is still a bit wet, the card makes darker lines. This is because you create a groove in the paper and then the paint pulls into that groove. This is an easy way to create trunks and branches in your trees. Allow the painting to dry thoroughly. Now you can use the grey mix to enhance the mountain on the left. This is where you can cover up the areas that bled into the sky, if that happened to you. Use a thinner or smaller brush and add the grey mix here. You will get more texture if you dab the paint in and use short brush strokes. If you paint in large, solid strokes, you will get a solid look, which will not give any dimension or variety to your mountain. It will simply make it look flat and uninteresting. For the water, you are going to mimic the colors in the sky. Start with the Quin Gold at the foot of the mountain, then add a bit of Quin Magenta and finally the Ultramarine in front. Use water to blend the colors to get a smooth transition. While this first layer dries, you can use Quin Gold for the grassland on the left. Again, add a bit of paint and then add water to smooth out your brush strokes. This part is done wet on dry. Use the colors on your palette to add some blues and greens to the gold flat wash. Vary your brush strokes to give dimension to the terrain. Use the brown to add a few rocks and then use the darker colors to add shadows so that your terrain looks undulated and not just flat and uninteresting. Use the tip of the brush to add tiny dots and dashes to resemble clumps of grass and bushes. Mix a bit more of the darker brown by adding more blue to your brown mix and stipple the edge of the river. And to add more values to the terrain, it's important that you have light, middle, and dark values to maintain interest in your landscape. The river area should be fairly dry by now, so you can use some of the blue to add a few ripples to the water, just a few dots and dashes here and there. Don't overdo it. The river is not your focus point. The marks can be darker and more prominent to the front, and you can brush them out lightly with your finger towards the back. Use the orange mix for the roof of the house. Add a bit of brown for the shadows and the windows. The trees have dried nicely now, so you can add some darker colors to give your trees dimension. You can also paint in some more branches with a thin brush like a rigger. Just dab the colors in. Don't use long, solid brush strokes. Add a few strokes of magenta to the foreground to tie your sky and the terrain together. Use gold for the right wall of the house and a bit of watered down blue for the front, as this will be the shadow side. Now you can use a rigger or a thin brush to add a few taller grass stalks to the terrain in front, and to add a few shadows here and there to enhance the values. Sometimes it is easier to just do a natural landscape, but adding elements like a barn or a house to it makes it a little bit more interesting. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon. Vaya con Dios.